Okay, hello. This is the introduction to a series of lectures on what I call the South China Sea farce. All right, I emphasize farce here. Now, I'm not saying that we should not take this serious. I believe we should take it serious, but I'm calling it a farce because I think it is way blown out of proportion. It is over exaggerated hype in terms of the seriousness of the threat and of in terms of the actual dollar amount of the resources at stake. Okay, hopefully that'll be made clear as we go along. So I'm going to divide this topic into a number of lectures. The first one, which I'll cover today, is the basic laws that pertain to the South China Seas and to navigation throughout the world in general. Right? And we'll cover that first. Then we'll get into competing claims. I'll show you basically what different countries are claiming what. All right, in the series of maps here, what it should be in this map, and this map, what they're claiming, and what kind of an introduction to what resources are at stake. All right. So this is more of the same. And then the next lecture is going to be a brief history of the competing claims for the South China Sea. All right, going back to 300 AD here. All right, and this is more recent times. Very recent here. All right, then I'm going to give you a list of China violations of the United Nations Convention on Law of the Seas. All right. No, I'm not saying China is the only violator. I'm just saying China is the biggest violator here. All right, that's why we're focusing on China. All right, and then I'm going to shift to: does the South China Sea imbroglio or conflict have the potential for another bullshit Cold War? All right, and the two main concerns of USA are China's threat to freedom of the navigation through the South China Seas, right? And also China's grab of all the resources in the South China Seas, or at least the majority of the resources, right? China's trying to steal resources that don't rightfully belong to them, according to the United Nations Convention on Law of the Seas. All right. So then we'll focus on the freedom of navigation issue next in a separate lecture. All right. And then we'll start looking at resources. Okay. And the three resources we're going to look at are first one is going to be fish. All right. Then we'll look at oil. And then natural gas. Where I got here? Gas right here. Right. Okay. So back to today's lecture. Today's lecture, we're going to focus on the basics of the law. And you got to follow the law. Right? There's reasons why we have law, so we don't have chaos and anarchy and conflict and war. All right? Follow the damn law. So the law on the books, that's pretty much universally accepted throughout the world, is United Nations Convention on Law of the Seas. Right? That's the abbreviation there, UNCLOS. Right? So it's the internationally recognized rules of the seas, referred to as the Constitution of the Seas. Right? It set rules for the use of the seas and its resources, as well as protocols and mechanisms to address disputes and grievances between countries. All the key players in the discussion below in the South China Seas have signed the damn law, except Taiwan and the USA. China has. Why don't they follow it? They signed it. All right, basic definitions. Baseline. Baseline is a point of shoreline at low tide, which means furthest point out to sea. For example, if this is your land here, right, this is shoreline at high tide, well, when low tide comes, the water moves out. All right, so low tide is further out to sea. So this is your baseline right here. Here on out. They measure zones from baseline here. All right, another key definition is called innocent passage. Right, ships passing by. If there's a requirement for innocent passage, well, this is what they must or must not do. So for passage to be innocent, ships must not use force against the coastal state, use any weapons. You can't practice your weapons or fire off your weapons. Gather intelligence that threatens a coastal state. All right, surveillance. Disseminate propaganda against a coastal state. Launch or land aircraft. Launch, land, or take aboard any military device. Load or unload any commodity, currency, or person contrary to customs. Fiscal, immigration, or sanitary laws of the coastal state. Willfully pollute, conduct fishing, conduct research or surveys, interfere with communication of the coastal state. Innocent passage also requires advance notification of passage. So you got to call them and say, hey, we're coming through in advance. All right. Now, definition of an island. An island is a naturally, this is important, naturally formed area of land surrounded by water, which is above water at high tide, which means it's always above water. This means an island must be above water at all times except for waves and storm surges. Also, an island must be capable of sustaining human habitation or economic life on its own. All right, that's an important distinction between an island and a rock. Islands can be used to demark territorial sea, exclusive economic zone, and continental shelf. So they're just like continental land. All right. Now, a rock is a landmass above water at high tide, just like an island, but cannot sustain human habitation or economic life on its own. All right. You can't bring a desalination plant there and make fresh water and say, oh, that doesn't work. You got to have a source of fresh water on that island. You got to have a source of food on that island, right? Or the surrounding waters. Rocks which cannot sustain human habitation or economic life on their own shall have no exclusive economic zone or continental shelf, right? But as far as I understand it, rocks do demark territorial seas and contiguous zones. All right, contiguous zones, I'll explain that down here. All right, so here's a quick introduction to the different zones. Okay, so this is your baseline right here. Remember we talked about baseline being the furthest point out to sea at low tide there. All right, if you go 12 miles out, that's your territorial seas. You have sovereign rights there. If you go 24 miles out, that's called the contiguous zones. You also have sovereignty there to enforce your laws, customs, regulations, so forth, right? Now, if you go out 200 nautical miles from your baseline, that is called your economic exclusive economic zone, right? Where you have right over the resources of the seas, of the seabed and the subsoil below the seabed. So if there's oil or any other minerals there, gas, whatever. All right. Continental shelf is a little tricky. High seas or anything that doesn't apply here. So it's not claim zones. Well, that's high seas where everyone has equal access to it. All right. Continental shelf, like I said, is tricky. I'll try to explain that. So territorial seas. extends up to 12 miles from baseline. There's your baseline, 12 miles out, right? Coastal states have sovereignty within it. Passages allowed for all ships, civilian, military, but must be innocent. You have to have innocent passage if you're going through there, right? Within 12 miles of their baseline, right? And it also must be continuous and expeditious, which means you can't lay anchor. You can't just loiter around and drift. You got to just, go on steadily through. Coastal states may restrict passage for non-innocent ships, so you can block it if it's not innocent. That's allowed. Applies to surface, soil bed, and airspace. So this applies to aircraft. Now, key difference is in contiguous zone, it doesn't apply to aircraft down here. All right, contiguous zone extends 24 miles out, double the territorial seas, right? And the reason why they did this is, give people a little bit, give coastal states a little bit more leeway so that they can better defend their laws, all right, near the shores, right? So extends 24 miles from baseline to enforce sovereignty. That's enforcing your laws. Coastal states may enforce customs, taxes, import taxes, fiscal, immigration, or sanitary laws and regulations within its territory or territorial seas. Punish infringement of regulators and laws committed within its territorial seas or within its territory or territorial seas. So it can stop and board ships. It can seize ships, right, for violating laws. Now, that applies to what? That applies to continental land or to true islands, not to rocks, not to reefs, not to artificial islands, right? Oh, no, wait a minute. It does apply to rocks. Territorial seas and contiguous zones does apply to rocks, but not to reefs or artificial islands. Yeah, it gets tricky. All right, applies to soil bed and surface, but not airspace. All right, so you cannot fly, for example, a military surveillance aircraft within the territorial seas of another nation. All right, but you can fly that military surveillance aircraft within the contiguous zone because airspace does not apply to it. All right. Exclusive economic zone. Up to 200 nautical miles from baseline. All right. Coastal states have sovereign rights over all natural resources, living or non-living, of the waters, seabed, and subsoils, as well as other economic activities such as production of energy from water, currents, and wind. Right? Or waves even. Passage need not be innocent. The requirement of innocent passage does not apply to the exclusive economic zone, nor does it apply to the contiguous zone. All right. Continental Shelf. This is the trickiest one. Coastal states have exclusive rights to develop the living and non-living resources on the seabed and subsoil only, not of the waters. All right. Except when in the exclusive economic zone where waters and surface also does apply. The distance of the continental shelf is at least 200 miles from baseline, as I understand it, up to 350 nautical miles from baseline. This is kind of tricky. You got to read it, and it is a little tricky. It's kind of vague in the wording here. Or 100 miles from the 2,500 meter depth line. Now, the reason for this is because the continental shelf typically is about 200 feet deep, less than 200 feet deep. Then it drops off like a cliff, going down to 10,000 feet, 15,000 feet, whatever. All right. Okay. But what they're saying, so for example, let's say right off the baseline, it dropped off to 10,000 feet, hypothetically, right off your baseline, you know, right off your shores, it drops straight down to 10,000. Well, your continental shelf goes 100 miles out. All right. All right. Because it's from the 2,500 meter depth line, which is 7,500 feet deep, or roughly, maybe about 8,000. Meters are a little bit bigger than yards, right? Okay. So this is kind of tricky. And again, key distinction is it applies to the soil bed and subsoil only. All right. So high seas applies to any waters not part of an exclusive economic zone, territorial seas, or internal waters of a state, or in the archipelagic waters of an archipelagic state, like the Philippine Islands, right? A whole bunch of islands. All the water in between all the islands of the Philippines is the archipelagic waters. So there's an example. Here's the Philippines, right? All these waters inside it are the archipelagic waters. All right. All right. So high seas does not apply to that. Freedom for navigation, overflight, lay submarine cables, pipelines, construct artificial islands, other permanent installations, fishing, scientific. You can do all of this. Free navigation, right? Free overflight. You can lay cable there, lay pipelines, construct any artificial island you want, construct any other permanent installation, like an oil rig, fishing, conduct fishing or scientific research there. No restrictions in the high seas. For example, okay, these are economic exclusive zones. Here's China, here's Vietnam, here's Malaysia, Brunei is something in here. Here's Philippines. This area in here is not part of an economic exclusive zone of any country. So this is high seas right here. Anything in here is high seas. All right. All right. Okay. Borders between waters of adjacent or opposite coastal states are delimited at equidistant by agreement. All right, so see purple line example in the map below. All right, so I drew this in myself here. All right, so the red line here is what China's claiming. All right, you know, that's bullshit. Better line is equidistance for exclusive economic zone here. All right, I should. So here's the border between, here's Vietnam, here's China. There's the border right there. It comes off the border. Hainan is part of China. This island here is part of China. So that's part of their territory. All right. So you split that. All right. You split that down the middle here. I mean, I drew this in. It's kind of rough. All right. You split it here. And you see it goes through the Pratley's. Pratley Islands around here. Right. So it kind of goes this way. Right. All right. That's the idea there. A reef cannot be used as a baseline for territorial seas unless it is a fringe of an island or continental land, right? Like a barrier reef. All right. Then you can use that as baseline. But a reef by itself cannot be used as baseline. It cannot mark territory. Only continents, islands, and rocks can mark territory. Right. So there is an exception to reefs if it's a barrier reef, right, around an island or a continent. South China Sea Arbitration Award of 2016 designated all of the Scarborough Shoals, Spratlys as rocks or reefs that can sustain no human habitation naturally, and therefore do not demark exclusive economic zone or continental shelf. All right. China apparently has 16 islands in the Paracels, and as far as I know, there has been no ruling as to their status. Right, island, rock, or reef, whatever they are. However, given the fact that Itu Aba Island, which is the largest island in the Spratlys, was classified as a rock and is larger than any island in the Paracels, it may be assumed that all the Paracel island masses are rocks and thus cannot demark exclusive economic zone or continental shelf. All right. So let me show you a map here. Okay, here are the Paracel Islands. Here are Scarborough Shoals. These are just a bunch of reefs. Right here are the Spratly Islands. Now, according to the Hague 2016 ruling, right, of the complaint brought forth by the Philippine Islands, they said that every damn landmass in the Spratly chain here is not an island. So you cannot use this to demark exclusive economic zone or continental shelf. So China's claim using that to demark this red exclusive economic zone is false. These are not islands. They're not. They cannot support human habitation or economic life on their own. Right? Scarborough Shoals, all these reefs are not islands. Okay? Now the Paracels, the largest island is Itu Abu, which is somewhere around here, right? It is an island that's possessed by Taiwan, actually. There's Taiwan up there, right? And it is the largest landmass in the Spratlys. Best chance, and it also has some fresh water, right? Best chance of supporting human habitation, but it was ruled it cannot. There is no damn island in the entire Spratlys. These do not demark territory for exclusive economic zone or continental shelf, which is resources, right? You cannot claim resources due to possessing any of these. Now the Paracels here, right? There's no ruling on them. However, given the fact that Itu Aba Island is larger than any damn landmass in the Paracels, right? I'm willing to bet that Paracels cannot be classified as islands that can support human habitation, all right, on their own. So these are not formal islands. They cannot demark territory. They cannot be used to claim here. All right, you see how China's using the Paracels to claim this? Bullshit. All right, that line's going to go more like through here because you can claim Hanan, you can live on that, right? So you split down there. Okay. All right. Free, unrestricted passage is allowed in all water zones with two caveats. Within the contiguous zone, which is 24 miles from baseline, the laws, rules, regulations, customs, traffic patterns of a coastal state must be obeyed. Right? You got sovereignty there. The coastal states got sovereignty there. Within territorial seas, passage must be innocent. And also submarines must pass on the surface. You can't have submarines going underwater and whatever. Now, another exception is USA federal law holds that suspected drug trafficking boats can be boarded pretty much anywhere throughout the world, right? Honestly, anywhere. It comes from, let's say, Argentina or something like that, right? Straight out of the port, you can board that sucker. All right. Not straight out of the port, but beyond the contiguous zone of that coastal state. 24 miles out, you can board that sucker. Artificial islands and permanent structures can be built anywhere except within another coastal state's territorial seas, exclusive economic zone, or continental shelf. This means they can be built within a coastal nation's own water zones or on the high seas. You could build these artificial islands anywhere damn want if it's your own water zone or on the high seas. Right? Quote, artificial islands, installation structures do not possess the status of islands. They have no territorial sea of their own, and their presence does not affect the delimitation of the territorial sea, the exclusive economic zone, or the continental shelf. All right. Okay. So artificial islands cannot be used to demark these territories. Boundaries between exclusive economic zones for adjacent coastal states are determined by equitable agreement, must be reached in a timely manner, or resort to procedures set in Part 15. This is about contesting or just making disputes, right? Bringing it before the court for a ruling. All right. When fish stocks cross the boundaries of two or more exclusive economic zones, for example, let's see here. Here is China's exclusive economic zone. Here's Philippines. Well, the fish may be right around here, right? They're right on the border, going across both sides, right? Mutual agreement must be made for the managing stocks. All right. What does that mean? Right. Typically, what that means is how much fishing you can take. Right. What are the rules? Let's say you're fishing for bluefin tuna. All right. What size tuna must the tuna be before you can take it? For example, I believe for USA, the limit is 73 inches, right? Well, you don't want to take these baby tuna because you're depleting the population. Let them grow, right? Let them reproduce, right? That way you better manage and preserve and maintain the fish population, right? Well, maybe China's got a different size. Well, you got to come to a different. You got to come to some equitable agreement, right? Maybe there's limits on the volume of fish. Well, then you gotta, whatever. It's all about conservation of the fish stock, so you don't deplete it. The same applies for highly migratory species. Oh yeah, bluefin tuna. So bluefin tuna move a lot. Well, maybe the tuna are here. Then maybe they come over here a different time of year, right? Maybe summertime they're up here. Wintertime they come down here. I don't know, something like that. All right. Exclusive economic zone. Sovereign rights over resources in the water, seabed, subsoil. The coastal state may, in the exercise of its sovereign rights to explore, exploit, conserve, and manage living resources in the exclusive economic zone. Take such measures including boarding, inspection, arrest, and judicial proceedings as may be necessary to ensure compliance with the laws and regulations adopted by it in conformity with this convention. So it's got to be in conformity with the United Nations Convention on Law of the Seas, right? But within 200 miles, you can board, inspect, arrest. You can seize that damn ship, bring him to court, right? You know, arrested crews shall be freed promptly upon posting bond. Coastal state penalties may not include imprisonment or any other corporal punishment without agreement. In cases of arrest or detention of foreign vessels, the coastal state shall promptly notify the flag state through appropriate channels of the action taken and of any penalty subsequently imposed. So you can seize foreign vessels. The only requirement is you gotta notify the flag state, the state of the flag it's flying, right away. It is permissible to lay cable and pipeline in another country's exclusive economic zone or continental shelf, and in the high seas. Anywhere in the high seas is okay. Archipelagic states must allow maintenance and replacement of existing cables. In archipelagic waters. Okay, so that's the basics of the United Nations Convention Law of the Seas, and for the purposes of this series of lectures, that's all the laws you're going to have to know. Right? So pretty simple, not too much involved there.